Wait a second. Before we attack each other and tear ourselves to shreds like a pack of maniacs, let's just open the sack first and see what's actually in it. It might not even be worth the trouble.
Hi.
Okay, it's worth it.
I managed to put together a small compilation of social experiments from all over the internet. What we're going to do is extract the numbers and mash them all together on a single graphic. Alexa, the model with professional pictures, managed to score well over 2,800 likes on a single day. Josh, the man from the cold open, got 3 likes in 3 weeks. Nicoleta, a 65-year-old woman, terrible picture, bad angle, no filters or makeup on an elderly woman. Assuming Nicoleta really came to play, the chattest of chats doesn't stand half a chance. This experiment was called the Pig Woman. The premise was simple: create in Photoshop the most unattractive woman possible. After they were all gathered, she made them compete in full Hunger Games style to earn the privilege of going on a date with her. But for women, as we can see here, a man starts to qualify as average only when he reaches the top 16% of men. They are quite literally drowning in options. So, is it really a surprise they are as astoundingly selective as they are? Tinder is nothing more than the digital representation of what the modern day dating scene has become.
I am going to pretend to be a woman on the app.
I thought it'd be really interesting to do the same sort of thing, but from a disability point of view.
I want to see what it's like if a woman is put into the shoes of a man.
One of the Tinder profiles has her like sexy model photos. The other one is just like her regular everyday type photo.
Good evening. If you're joining me on this video, most likely you've watched your fair share of social experiments. Depending on the experiment, the results can be quite explosive. It's a very interesting field. People enjoy watching the fireworks, I guess. And when it comes to the dating scene, the results are usually so lopsided that it can become a fun experience in general to make. In doing my research for this video, I managed to watch quite a bit of footage, and one of the things that annoyed me the most was the creators of the experiments rambling for endless minutes before getting on with the numbers. I am not going to expose you to that. And while there are a few concepts I should explain beforehand, I think we can just do it on the fly. That being said, let's jump right into it with the first social experiment. This one was done by the YouTube channel Whatever. Through all the studies I've read, this could easily be one of the best. 1000 swipes on both accounts. Handsome Brian got 269 matches, making for a 27% match rate. If you remember my last video or read Worst Online Daters Experiment, an incredibly attractive man at 26 years of age got a 22.6% match rate. The numbers are close enough that it makes sense. 22 versus 27 is close enough. This gives us a very good idea about the match rate of an attractive young man on Tinder. A solid place to begin. But what about the female counterpart? What about Briana? Well, she got 701 matches, making for a stunning 70% match rate. Well over twice Brian's number with an astounding 54% message rate. Well over 13 times more messages than Brian. It's a great study. Very well done. So, using this as a solid foundation, we can go ahead and start building, working our way into the next experiment. This one was done by a channel called Playing with Fire. The premise is simple. A very attractive woman in Miami versus what he calls a very average girl in Miami. The average girl is this, just to show you the pictures. The bad part about this experiment is that we don't get any straight numbers. There's no fixed number of swipes, no match rate percentage, which are things we want. This man focuses more in roasting male profiles, telling you to learn text game to stand out from the crowd. I respectfully disagree. I'll show you why later on. But Even if we don't have the numbers, we can still rescue a few things. This man had the tact to buy Tinder Gold. This is actually good for us, since now we gain access to a new bit of information we didn't have before, which is being able to see the amount of likes each woman gets. In other words, we can now actually quantify in numbers just how popular each profile was during the experiment. The attractive model, Alexa, got 1,015 likes in 24 hours. Meanwhile, the average-looking girl got 501 likes in the same time. Those numbers are really fascinating. And if you've ever used Tinder, 1,000 likes a day can seem like an incredible number. But wait, there's more. Because later the same day, Alexa manages to break through 2,800 likes, while the average girl breaks past 1,200. We could say they have an overwhelmingly positive reception. Sure. Then again, these numbers could be a fluke. It's possible there was a mistake somewhere in the experiment, right? The numbers are a bit too imposing. We might need a bit more information. Sure. This next experiment was done on a blog, on a site called Swipe Helper. They put an incredibly attractive couple on Tinder with matching profiles, John and Jane. Same bio, both lawyers, excellent photos, and good rules for this study. If we're counting exclusively likes, by the end of the first day, Jane had a solid 2,000 lead over John, which only grew wider by the end of the week. Jane consistently scoring 1,000 likes a day, breaking past the 7K mark on the final day. I mean, that's impressive, but the number still feels a bit unrealistic when you consider that the attractive lawyer, John, was getting 25 likes a day, and this guy, Josh, from the cold open, was getting 3 likes every 3 weeks. Is it possible that the gap is just so astoundingly wide between men and women? We might need a bit more information. Okay, one more, fast as I can. I managed to find this post in Reddit by a user called Traplord Mason in California. One of his attractive female friends made a Tinder profile and went to bed, waking up to this. 1,800 likes. When you check the comments below, he follows up and claims she easily broke through the 2,600 mark on a single day. Right, okay. So, by reading all these studies, we get an idea that, for a woman, the amount of likes she gets a day can be pretty variant, from 500 likes a day on the low end to 2,800. On that note, next social experiment. Clariz on YouTube. Very interesting premise. She's going to create 2 different profiles, one of them with the worst possible picture of her, and the other with the absolute best. We're talking Facetune, Photoshop, makeup, filters, anything she could possibly add to make herself look better, it's there. She ran the experiment for 3 days, 300 swipes. Very well done study. Her attractive picture gets an incredible 66% MR, which in her words is pretty acceptable. Similar to Briana's 70%, if you remember. For her ugly picture, she gets a 22%. Now, why are we stopping here? In my past video, we went in very heavy detail about the WOD Tinder experiment. Excellent study where we find that an average young man gets around a 0.5 MR. Meanwhile, an attractive young man, 26 years of age, would get around a 22.6. These numbers here are a complete coincidence I never expected. Both these profiles are getting the same level of matches and attention. And, well, most likely, Clariz will be at an overwhelming advantage regarding messages, since guys open up, talk, communicate and message much more often. This study by the YouTube channel Whatever already made that crystal clear. A very interesting find. Next study. SubDaily06 in YouTube. He makes a pretty good social experiment. The premise is very interesting. Same attractive girl, different pictures. On the one end, homely average pictures and dog selfies. On the other, posing and professional pictures edited with filters and Photoshop. If you can, check the number of matches the girls got in the spreadsheet. They are incredibly close, barely 8 matches apart. And still, as good as the experiment is, there is a massive flaw here. He forgets to mention just how many swipes he made to get to those numbers he's displaying. That number of swipes is heavily needed for the match rate percentage, or MR, which is the number I will be using for my final chart. Now, there's a way around this. In the experiment we had previously seen, we noticed that Clariz's attractive profile gets a 66% match rate, yeah? And in the first study, we had a neat and tidy 70% for Briana. So we can ballpark a 60 to 70% rate for an attractive woman. And well, feel free to disagree with me, but I would consider Sarah to be a very attractive woman. So, what we could do is try using these figures here to reverse engineer the swipe number this man forgot to mention. And if you do that, the hypothetical number of swipes ends up oddly close to 700, doesn't it? In the beginning, Subdaily makes no mention of buying Tinder Gold, and nothing in the video leads me to believe that he did. So his swipes were most likely limited to 100 a day, which means it's reasonably safe to assume that the number of swipes is a multiple of 100. Check the numbers by the girls. That is a very strong indicator that, most likely, he ran the experiment for an entire week. It's a very reasonable assumption to make. I'm assuming 3 things here. 1. He didn't buy Tinder Gold. 2. Sarah is an attractive woman. And 3. He swiped the maximum number of times every single day in the study. Now, I could be wrong, but just for fun, let's try running the numbers anyways. That would be a 66.8% match rate for the normal pictures and a 68% flat for the model pictures. Now, I want you to take a look and compare these 4 pictures here. Look at the percentages and tell me what you see. We are going to be circling back to this on the final graphic, but for now, I just want to move on. So, we have a rather good idea about attractive women and how they experience Tinder. But, what about the women that are not conventionally attractive? How do they experience Tinder? I mean, we do have a 22% match rate on this picture. That's a pretty good place to begin. I did manage to find this video by the channel AdaMustang, where he's testing this girl called Molly. Now, Molly is a woman that, personally, I would not consider a classic beauty or conventionally attractive. Feel free to disagree with me, of course. Now, once again, the creator of the video doesn't think it's necessary to show any kind of numbers here. So, we're going to have to be doing detective work again. Since Molly's likes are capped at 99, that means he didn't buy Tinder Gold. Therefore, he had 300 swipes at the maximum. We can see 87 messages here, so we know that at the very least, Molly was matching at the 29% MR. This is, if you remember, well above Brian. This 29 is an astoundingly conservative figure. It's the bare mathematical minimum. I'm going to be leaving the math here if anyone is interested in double checking, but the summary is that the only way to make this number realistic is understanding that she is matching way above 29% and, most likely, under 45%. Now, even with math and using all the information we had before, there's no real way of knowing her match percentage, which is why I'll have to give up on Molly. And that felt really strange to say. What I meant is that Molly is not going to be appearing in the final chart. Even if Molly's study is not something we can use, there's some good information we can harvest out of it. If we try some movie magic, slow down the video and isolate the messages, we can figure out what all these men were saying to Molly. See, Molly is getting a lot of positive attention, plenty of interested men, and nothing but positive reviews and openers, calling her beautiful, heart eyes, sexy girl, angel, beautiful eyes, gorgeous, stunning, cutie, mad cute, too pretty for this app, etc. She is matching with athletic and very attractive men with interesting profiles, and they have nothing but sweet words and admiration for her. All this is real. But let's put a pin on that, briefly. We can try with a different video. This one from a man called Greek MGTOW. He's using this fake profile, Nicoleta, a 65-year-old woman. Terrible picture, bad angle, no filters or makeup on an elderly woman. He's using a specialized software to fake his GPS location, allowing him to float this fake profile in several parts of the world. He managed to swipe through 25 different countries. I will be leaving the results below so you can check for yourself. As you can tell by the figures, the reception was overwhelmingly positive. Her final MR was 37.5%, globally, of course. She did the worst in Russia and the absolute best in India, New Delhi, where she actually managed to hit the 50% MR. Most of the experiments I'm covering took place in the US though. So, to equalize, from now on, that is the figure we are going to be using. That gives us a very interesting number in 40.8%. So we have that figure and that 22% on this picture right here, but I think we can do one more. This experiment was done in medium.com by a woman named Zlatka. I quote, "Tinder experiment, men willing to hook up with a fridge." The premise, to try and challenge two Tinder myths. First, do men swipe right on everyone? Second, do women need to be attractive to find a match on Tinder? This is the way she did it. Zlatka created two different profiles, one male and the other female. She decided to use the exact same set of pictures for both. Pictures of two restaurant dishes, a fridge, and the side of a building. You see where this is going. 400 swipes each over 4 consecutive days. The results? 2% match rate for the male profile, 32.5% match rate for the female. Which is essentially saying 1 in 3 men found this female fridge attractive. Well, this breaks her first hypothesis, since if men really did swipe yes on everyone, she should have gotten a 100% match rate, right? She got many interested men, most of them polite, a good few propositions of sex even without knowing what she looked like. Not to mention she even went on a date as a result. The number was really interesting to me, 32.5%. That means that in the chart we're making, she is under Nicoleta with her 40% and well over Brian with his 27%. There's no arguing with the numbers, I guess. This female fridge, this literal picture of a fridge, did better than this man. We can all agree this is not an ordinary man. This guy is an absolute child, and he's getting outdone by a goddamn fridge. I'm not sure, that's funny to me. You gotta laugh. But the other interesting angle is the 2% ratio this male fridge got. Reading the study a bit closer, we get a bit of information that one of the women swiped yes on the male fridge by accident, which in turn brings the match rate from a 2% to a 1.75. That will come up later in the graphic. Okay, we have a fair number of entries in our chart already, but I think we have room for just one more. This experiment came from a YouTube channel called SachelInShape. Well, once upon a time, Sachel used to not be in shape and weigh twice as much as she does today. Having the pictures of her fluffy past, she made 2 different profiles and went on Tinder, 100 swipes. The results? Not really a significant gap. The profiles were barely 9 matches and 4 messages apart. This is what Sachel had to say about it.
Your girl hasn't had any size. I'm actually really shocked by the results. Like, I am shook. What I noticed is I probably only got about 10 less likes on my plus size profile compared to my slimmer profile. I thought that I wasn't gonna get likes or matches, but honestly it was a very insignificant difference. So honestly, maybe I was wrong.
Insignificant. I agree. You would expect a much larger difference between both profiles, but that's just not reality, is it? Okay, with all that finally out of the way, I think we can safely start making a chart about all the studies we covered, just to get a better idea of where we're standing. And it would look a bit like this. I managed to compile every single social experiment we covered in this tower right here, and we're going to explore it bit by bit. There's some great few gems of information to get. That being said, I think the bottom is a very fitting place to begin. We can eventually work our way up. At the very bottom of the barrel, we can see the classic average man. Average Joe. A man truly at the 50th percentile of everything. True average. We covered the numbers and the stats in our past video already. According to the CDC and Census.gov, he should be 5'9", slightly overweight, average attractiveness, and making $40,000 a year. That hypothetical man is right smack down the middle of average. His match rate, 0.5%. In the book Dataclysm by Christian Rather, one of the creative minds behind OkCupid, we noticed that women, by and large, have a rather twisted notion of what an average man is supposed to be. See, to women, only 1 in 6 men qualifies to be average or above, which doesn't really fit from a common sense point of view. Average, I would argue, should be right in the middle of the chart. But for women, as we can see here, a man starts to qualify as average only when he reaches the top 16% of men. And even then, most of them will tell you they would never date an average man. They'll even be offended at the idea of dating one. I covered that in the cold open of my past video. There was a very clear interview where they asked women if they would ever consider an average man for a relationship. There was not a single positive response among them. They all wanted better than average. Or rather, they all wanted better than their own perception and definition of what an average man is supposed to be. So, we know that the true average man sits at the very bottom of the barrel. No surprises there. And if you happen to be below average, well, at the very least, in the Tinder market, you don't even rank. You are practically invisible. And it makes sense. We all saw it together in the experiments above. If women like Molly and Nicoleta are getting flooded with attention, praise, messages, and heart eyes, and all this is from men who are fit, interesting, and attractive, just why in God's green earth would any woman ever pick a true average man? I mean, think about it. In the face of overwhelming options, can you really blame them for consistently picking the very best option available to them? Well, best option. There's something to be said about the kind of men women overwhelmingly seem to select. In my past video, we saw these male profiles getting a ton of attention. One of these men was a convicted felon for doing unspeakable things to children. Another had a visible swastika tattoo. It's a bit irresponsible for me to call them the best option. And I get the point, but you need to understand that there's a hierarchy in place on Tinder. That's why this graphic is a tower in the first place. There's people at the top, and then there's people at the bottom. I don't control who goes where. What I can do is show you the numbers. And on that note, we can keep climbing. Let's try and focus. We can see Braden Gerard matching at the same percentage as a profile with no pictures. Just a plate of food, a fridge, and the side of a building. This one blindsided me actually. I would not call this an unattractive man. And despite his massive investment in the platform and carefully researched pictures, he's matching at the exact same rate as a profile with no pictures at all. Going up the ladder, there's a significant gap in percentages, and then we can get to the 20% mark, which is 1 in 5 people matching with you. The one number that instantly jumps at you is this 22%. Now, if you remember the Tinder experiment from my past video, Wad entered Google and searched for one of the most handsome men he could find. This is not the picture that was used, but it helps give you an idea. Compare that picture with this picture, and understand there's only a 0.6 difference in match percentages, which is nothing. These profiles are matching at the exact same rate. And if you remember, this girl was disappointed at the results, even though 5 guys wanted to go out with her immediately, and she was getting super likes and a heavy amount of interest. We can keep on climbing. We can see Brian, the absolute Chad from the first experiment. I want to stop here, briefly. I want you to pay attention to the fact that this profile is beating this profile. Pictures of 2 dishes, a fridge, and the side of a building are beating this man. This one right here. Female profiles are just that much in demand. We're talking 32%. That is essentially 1 in 3 men willing to go out with this profile. If you remember the experiment, men responded very well to it. I also would like to make a small addition here, if I can. I wasn't able to put it in the chart in good faith since I didn't have an exact figure, but this is around the place where Molly should be. I worked the numbers with the information I had, and mathematically speaking, her lowest possible match rate is 29%, comfortably placing her well above Brian by default. Now, I'm not going to bore any of you with the mathematics. I'll just place the numbers here to show it didn't come out of nowhere. All you need to know is that the real number is somewhere way above 29 and most likely below 45%. That being said, let's keep climbing. I want to get to the high rankers. Right here, you can spot Chad at 34 years old and Nicoleta at 65 going head to head. Remember, Walt went into Google and used the most attractive picture he could possibly find for his profile. This is the limit. From all studies I've read, guys cannot do better than this figure on Tinder. This is the apex, the pinnacle for men. So, the chaddest of chads is matching slightly above the 65-year-old woman. No makeup, no filters, that picture skeleton profile. They are essentially head to head. But we can keep climbing. Right here, we can see Sachel from the plus size experiment comfortably beating Chad and being the first one to break through the 50% MR, which is 1 in 2 people, or every other profile, matching with you. Now, after a full makeover and after cutting down her weight in half, we can obviously see Sachel's desirability and match rate go up. And yet, if you remember, even she was surprised at how small the gap was between the 2 profiles. That being said, we finally managed to break into the realm of high rankers. Now, I would personally argue that all these profiles we're going to see above fit in a certain category. We see the normal, the attractive, the professionally taken pictures. We can find Photoshop, makeup, filters, Facetune, FaceApp, Snapchat, anything you could possibly think of. I want you to pay attention to the fact that the numbers don't really change a whole lot. There is only a 5% difference in between the highest ranker, Briana, and the lowest, Sachel. By her own admission, an 11% gap is insignificant when dealing with the volume of interested men that approach them. What I found really interesting, though, is that all these different flavors of attractive women match in such a ridiculously narrow margin. Now, remember, you have 100 swipes a day. Do you really think you could schedule 60 dates on the same day? I mean, Monday to Friday, that's 300 matches to pick from to try and have your fun on the weekend. You and I both know all these men on Tinder are ready for action. These women are quite literally drowning in options. So, is it really a surprise they are as astoundingly selective as they are? This chart right here keeps making more and more sense by the second. Assuming you're average or below, you are not even in the game. you are just invisible to them. I could even make the argument that if you took a good selfie of Nicoleta and, well, ran it through a few filters, you could easily enter this pantheon of women. After all, we live in a world where a transformation like this, or where a post like this, is considered not just acceptable, but commonplace. As a matter of fact, we have an entire culture that, in many ways, glorifies and rewards this kind of theater. All the more so, there's some incredible videos about makeup transformations that are worth watching. But that's a bit of a tangent. I want to try and focus and stay on topic. My argument is this. Nicoleta, the 65-year-old woman, if put through basic filters, might be able to rank in the same league and go toe-to-toe with the high rankers of the tower. I understand it's difficult to believe, which is why I personally took the challenge. I'll try to enhance this picture myself. I happen to be a great control group since I've never used any kind of filter, makeup, or body-changing app in my life. Starting out, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. This was my first attempt, which I'll admit was not great. I tried to retouch everything manually and, well, one of her eyes ended up bigger than the other. It's a whole mess. But for my second attempt, I tried experimenting with a few different apps I have. I went on Facetune and managed to retouch the body, slim it down a bit, and ended up with this, which doesn't look terrible. I could have gone beyond, but I wanted to try and keep it realistic. After retouching the picture a little bit more, I slapped a random beautifying filter on it and ended up with this. I got to this result in under 30 minutes just by playing with my phone. These applications are incredibly intuitive and easy to use. Get me a duck selfie from a high angle and I'll do miracles. So, the argument I sense coming would be, listen, that picture is clearly and obviously fake. It's so ridiculously artificial, there is no man that would ever fall for it. It's an obvious catfish. Any man with an IQ even slightly above room temperature would swipe left on that thing every time. And to answer that, I should give you a small spoiler for my next video. These two pictures right here were wildly successful. Both of them were. The thirst is such that men, by and large, just do not care. They do not care. They just don't. Okay? So, am I wrong to assume that this picture would do significantly better than this one? My point is this. We all saw the tremendous level of thirst for pictures like this, or even this. This realm, if you'll forgive the term, this astoundingly privileged place in the tower, seems to be open to all women. All of them. Any kind of woman with a basic and rudimentary understanding of what an application is, which they should all have by default if they are using Tinder, can match at the same rate these women can. With just the slightest bit of socially accepted movie magic, they can all easily get here. Assuming Nicoleta really came to play, the chattest of chats doesn't stand half a chance. I will be running the tower again at the end of the video, slowly, so you can check it out at your own pace without me stopping it every 2 seconds to comment on it. I'm sorry about that. It's a difficult thing to process, isn't it? I mean, we all knew it was bad going in, but maybe we just didn't have the numbers to back it up. I'd love to take a brief second to make a small observation, if I can. Tinder does not work in an alternate universe or reality. Tinder is not the origin of all evils like some people will have you believe. The application itself is not shallow or disturbing. It's just a program. It's nothing but the digital representation of what the modern day dating scene has become. These numbers we just saw were not random or arbitrary. They are clearly displaying a message for all to see, if you know how to listen. This is my suspicion at least. But is it really that bad? Or am I just reading way too much into it? And this overwhelming advantage women seem to have on the platform doesn't seep at all into the real world. Well, remember the Natasha Aponte story? I covered this in my last video. This woman managed to con hundreds of men on Tinder to meet her for a date at the exact same time and place. After they were all gathered, she made them compete in full Hunger Games style to earn the privilege of going on a date with her. Why is this important? Well, this stunt inspired a user called Steve Jabba to make another social experiment. This is the last one we'll be covering in this video, I promise. It moves away from the Tinder ecosystem, which is where I made the bulk of my research, and moves to Plenty of Fish, another very popular online dating spot. The experiment was called The Pig Woman. The premise was simple: create in Photoshop the most unattractive woman possible. That is, Daisy Dukes 1992. Let's call her Daisy. Morbidly overweight and complete with a hairy chest, flabby arms, and a photoshopped pig's nose. After that, he made the most disturbing profile, fully displaying a terrible personality from the get-go. It read, and I quote, "Looking for a hot guy with cash." The experiment ran for 24 hours, and even if she wasn't online, she received hundreds of profile views during that time, added of course to 38 messages of interested men. All of this on a single day. The second she logged in, guys started bombarding her with messages. You can check the timestamps right here. They were coming hard and fast. A good few of them were rather attractive men, fully intent in having a, let's call it, romantic action with Daisy. Look at this guy, absolutely ripped and still competing for sexy fun with this woman. Remember the experiment with Molly? There was a whole horde of thirsty men pursuing her as well, singing her praises, calling her sexy, angel, gorgeous. Daisy seems to be getting the exact same kind of treatment. I would argue it doesn't matter how much you level your text game, your only choice is to become the best available option for these women. Doesn't that sound appealing? I'm not going to go on a tangent so close to the end of the video, but I want to try planting a small idea here. What do you think could be the psychological effects of this endless level of praise, attention, and admiration on women? At some point in their developmental years, a switch is flipped in which they start experiencing this kind of reality. This constant positive feedback loop that makes them think the world is a kinder, simpler, and much more wonderful place than it actually is. That they are deserving, just because of the fact they exist. They experience this dynamic online, and, if my suspicion is correct, that dynamic trickles some pores into the real world as well. The more attractive, the more selective, the more disconnected from the real world. How does this behavior shift affect their choices? Their partner selection, their hobbies and values, the entertainment they decide to consume, the idols they decide to worship and imitate, their attitude towards dating and relationships. After going through the numbers, we have a fairly good idea that women are overwhelmingly privileged when it comes to online dating. We could make a fairly strong argument that this advantage doesn't just exist in the online world. I think that's a rather fair assertion we can make at this point. That being said, we also know that this advantage, this privilege, is not eternal. By women's own admission, it has an expiration date. So the question would be, how do you think women react when the easy mode is finally at the close? How do they react when the privilege finally ends and the teacup shatters? Going into this video, doing the research, I expected the numbers to be bad, but I didn't expect them to be this bad. It really was a fascinating analysis to make. So Thank you for watching, and as promised, I will now leave you with the tower. Consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and the rest. That being said, have a wonderful rest of your day.